下应该可以娱乐。
That's me.
All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Duffy. I'm head of cloud migrations at Cloudreach, and I want to welcome you all to our webinar here tonight. I think we have a pretty exciting night. We're going to talk a little bit about cloud migrations, how businesses take advantage of that, and we're also going to try out some fabulous wines. So I think it'll be a great evening and talking about cloud services. With me tonight is Jeff Sternberg. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Rob. So my name is Jeff Sternberg, and great to meet everyone virtually. I'm a technical director in Google Cloud's Office of the CTO. And so I focus on collaborative innovation and emerging themes in technology with some of our most important customers. And great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Jeff. So why don't we go through the agenda, what we're going to talk about today, and when we're going to get to drink some of those wines. So we have a couple of different tastings scattered out throughout the agenda tonight, and so we'll get to try out all those wines that you should have gotten in the mail. So first of all, we're just going to go do a very quick welcome introduction to Cloudreach, who we are and what we do, and how we help customers get to the cloud and really take advantage of all the cloud services that are available to them. Then we'll introduce Jerome, who's Director of Operations at Lucid Wines, and he'll take us through some wine tastings of their different wines that they've sent to us. When we come back, we want to talk about this concept of the promise of the cloud. What is it, and how customers can attain it? This is Cloudreach's purpose statement, and so we want to talk about what that really means to us and how customers should think about it, interpreting it themselves. Then we'll go into a second wine tasting, and then we'll talk about how do you attain that promise of the cloud. What are the things that you as a business should think about and should do in order to really get the most value out of the cloud for your business. We'll go into a third wine tasting, and then we'll do Q&A. So if you have any questions that come up along the course of the night, and just feel free to drop them into the chat, or you can hold them for the end of the webinar when we'll open up and let people ask questions about the cloud content or the wine content. So looking forward to this evening. And why don't we first give you a quick overview of who Cloudreach is and what we do. If you go to the next slide, please. And so, so Cloudreach has been around for a long time, almost as long as the cloud has been around. But we've been cloud native from the start. So we've never owned a server, and we've always had a focus and a passion for the cloud. And we're very opinionated with the fact that we believe customers can achieve great value by utilizing cloud and all the services that cloud has to offer. And throughout that entire history of our company, we've really been a very close partner of Google in all the services that they can provide as part of their Google Cloud platform. Over the course of that time, we've really strengthened that partnership with hundreds of certifications. We've helped many customers achieve some of their goals through technology and through the cloud. Most recently, we've been recognized by Google as being their Security Cloud Partner of the Year for this past year, but also for the past 3 years. So this is something that we've a title that we've held on to for a long time, and we're very proud of that. Recently, also, Cloudreach has been added to Gartner's Magic Quadrant for cloud transformation services in the visionary category. So again, this is an area in which we have a long history of helping businesses achieve real transformation by using cloud. And so, those are some of the topics that we're going to talk about tonight between myself and Jeff in a conversational style webinar. So I hope it'll be good content for you, and feel free as we go along really to add those questions into the chat or save them, and we'd be happy to answer them at the end. With that, let me introduce Jerome, who is the Director of Operations at Lucid Wines, and he's going to take us through the first wine pairing that we have tonight.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jerome, and as you said, I'm Director of Operations at Lucid Wines. So before I jump into the wines too much, I'm going to give you a quick overview of ourselves as a company as well. So we're a small startup winery. We're only around for about 3 years now. We're started by my brother, the winemaker and owner, as a small local craft winery. We would just do very custom experimental wines, and we delivered them locally, had them at local restaurants and bars. until the pandemic hit and we were on the verge of going under. The time we were a two-man operation working out of our apartments and segued to doing these virtual tastings instead of opening our tasting room as we had planned. Ended up not only surviving, but kind of growing through the pandemic. And we now have 20 employees, 3 locations, and nationwide distribution. So I like to give that story because it gives you a little bit of a background of where we came from, and also gives me a chance to say thank you for having me on. This is the reason why we're still around as a company. And to be honest, happy hour is the best part of the day, you know, rather than deadlines and paperwork and that kind of thing. So that out of the way, let's get started on some of the wine and food. So you should have 5 wines in front of you. And I'm in California, so it's only 2 o'clock. I'm not going to be drinking along, but your first wine is the L1 Skin Contact White Blend. If you want to pull that out and open that. So Skin Contact name is because it's a white wine, but done more in the style of a red wine, where these skins are left on. Gives a little more body and depth of flavor, and just makes it a really versatile wine that red wine drinkers as well as white wine drinkers will enjoy. With your food, you're going to have some really good pairings with this. And much as I hate to admit it, the old cliche of light colors go with light wines and dark colors go with dark wines, it's true. So generally the things that you have there, cheeses, your cashews, your lemon curd, are going to be really great pairings along with this. Play off of either the creaminess from the skin contact or some of those sharp citrusy notes that go along with like the Chardonnay itself. So if you guys want to try some of those and enjoy that. And a little more about this wine. So say it's a white blend. It's Chardonnay about 70%, and the other 30% is Viognier. Adds a little bit more fruitiness to it than your traditional Chardonnay. That's because of that and the skin contact, we actually have a lot of people compare this to something more like a cider than a typical Chardonnay. That's a big part of our strategy and goes back to me referencing us as kind of a craft winery. We try to make all our wines, it's not necessarily that we try to, zig when other people are zagging, but that we try to make them accessible to everybody and not just your traditional wine crowds. So Kevin has 4 wine degrees, 20 years in the industry, consults all around Napa, won California Winemaker of the Year a couple years ago, but we don't come from your traditional wine audience. So we try to make the wine for people that would enjoy beers or whiskeys or ciders and not just this little secular part of the market. So hopefully you guys are enjoying that wine and the, different aspects of the flavor. And when we get to the end, we'll take a poll to see which wines your guys' favorites are. So for now, I'm going to leave it at that one wine. You're welcome to start sipping on your L2 Urban Flora Rosé during the next segment, but save a little bit for when I get a chance to talk about it. And on that note, back to you, Rob.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerome. I just tried that. That was really good. And so it's interesting how it's different how they keep the skin on. So that was new to me. So one of the things that Jeff and I wanted to talk about is Cloudreach's purpose statement, which is delivering on the promise of the cloud, and really trying to understand what this really means and how customers should start to think about the cloud and how it can enable their business, and then how to go about doing that, right, and getting it. And so this statement here, it really is Cloudreach's purpose or reason for being, right? Is how we want to help customers. We don't want to just help them enable a new technology or save money on data centers, or we're not very focused, or we're not only focused on the IT nature of cloud, but really the way in which we approach these problems in these conversations that we have with our customers is really about how can we use cloud to do more than transform your IT, but really transform your business. And so with that, I thought we could open up a conversation between Jeff and I about, what is the promise of the cloud, and what does that really mean? What is that promise? And so, on the next slide, we're really trying to outline that question here. And so, Jeff, maybe I'll just start by asking you directly, to you, what does this mean? What is the promise of the cloud? How should businesses start to think about what the possibilities are in the cloud for their business?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And you'll note I'm actually not drinking the wine because I wanted to be super sharp for this this conversation, but I'm looking forward to having some of it afterwards. So, I think about, the promise of cloud in probably 4 distinct ways currently. The first way is cloud really helps you accelerate the pace of innovation, right? So it's not just about, a lot of people talk about like the cloud can help you innovate, but it actually can help you do more innovation faster over time. And I really have found that in my career. When I first discovered cloud, probably about 10 years ago, it was amazing how much faster I could do everything. And why is that? It's because, cloud gives you so many options to do innovative things in your business, right? There's over 100 products listed currently in Google Cloud. And it's not just the core, technology infrastructure products like compute and storage, but also, databases, analytics, AI, and some of these higher level solutions that really start to, allow you to innovate faster. So, in the way I look at kind of, the paradigm shifts of computing in my career, when I first started, there was like client server. I don't know if any of you all are remember those days, but you had a server, and then you had a software client, and there was very little interconnection between them. And then later we upgraded to colo data centers, and then after that virtual machines or VMs. And I really think that cloud is the next major paradigm shift that we're really underway now. So once I realized that you could spin up machines on demand in the cloud, I was totally hooked. So innovation is kind of the first point. The second point I would say that it segues into is really cloud helps you transform your engineering culture. So, you mentioned Cloudreach is born in the cloud. You've never owned a server. I think Google in many ways is as a similar sort of engineering culture behind it that really, has at its core the ability to set up layers of core services to enable your engineering teams to build those like products and solutions without having to reinvent the wheel, right? So when Cloudreach, doesn't have to buy servers, similar sort of thing, Google engineers don't have to think about lower level, infrastructure elements or network engineering. So, and talent is obviously a consideration in any technology team. Without it, you can't accomplish anything in your business. And I really think that engineers are getting very used to this cloud world. I think that there's probably going to be a day relatively soon where it's going to be increasingly difficult to hire engineers that are where they're expected to work in a non-cloud environment, right? And then the final point on this that I would note is that as the major outage of Facebook yesterday demonstrated, these things are very complicated, right? They break. So, I don't want to say the promise of cloud is more complexity, but, I've noticed that technology teams that embrace cloud also embrace, modern practices like site reliability engineering or SRE. So if you haven't seen it already. I'd highly recommend the SRE book. You can see that at sre.google. And I think Cloudreach can help, kind of enable your SRE practices and things like that. I was doing a little reading on panic rooms for this morning, for example, to kind of understand what happened there, or how things, how teams can respond. So the third thing I would highlight is strategic growth. A promise of cloud is enabling and really furthering your strategic growth. So think about what kind of new products can you build, what kind of enhancements, what kind of services that are only possible, with cloud computing. A very obvious one maybe, and it sort of gets overlooked, is if you're thinking about expanding into a new region or country, there's likely already a cloud data center there, right? And it's probably closer to your users than your current data center. Google right now has 28 different regions and a bunch of different network edge locations. And so it's available actually in over 200 countries in the world. Do you have a call center? Do you have customers that call into you? Are you flooded with documents? Are some of those documents even paper documents, right? It would be amazing to think about paper, but there's a lot of businesses that are sort of crushed by paper all the time. And so, these situations are common, and, cloud tools have really evolved to solve them. And then the final thing I would mention is that the promise of cloud really promotes sustainability. And what I mean by that is kind of environmental impact and climate. So data centers currently use something like 1 to 3% of the world's electricity. And you can imagine that growing in the future as all of these digital experiences scale up, right? The pandemic has definitely, made things like this virtual wine tasting possible. And, there's tons of electricity powering these experiences around the world. So it's key to be as efficient as possible in that energy consumption, right? So generally, the cloud data centers are going to be more efficient because of simply economies of scale, and because the cloud service providers have been working on efficiency for years and years. And so when you run your workloads on the cloud, generally they're going to consume less energy than they would if you ran them on premise. And if you think about where that energy is all coming from, how much greenhouse gas emissions are generated by, producing the electricity, that's really an important consideration. So Google has been carbon neutral since 2007. We've also matched annual energy consumption with renewable energy purchasing since 2017, and we're on track to use carbon-free energy around the clock, 24/7 by the year 2030. So, I really think sustainability and furthering sustainability is a key promise of the cloud.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, right? So if I use Google Cloud, right, and the energy that's powering my workloads then is carbon neutral, essentially, right? And so it's, by using Google, I gain that sustainability within my own environment. Is that accurate?
That's right. That's right. And, there's all sorts of complexity into talking about carbon neutral and offsets and how you approach it. And it's unevenly adopted throughout the world, right? So one cloud region might actually have access to more carbon-free energy today than others. But over time, we're really working on powering the data center around the clock by clean energy.
Oh, wow. No, that is amazing. And I think, when people think of cloud, right, one of the great things about cloud is it allows you to align your costs and think about your costs over many different dimensions, right? So sustainability and the environmental impact is one way, right? The monetary costs, right? And so being able to scale up and down based on the actual utilization or the need that you have. And then, also your organizational costs, right? So one of the things about cloud is it allows you to be a lot more productive through the ways that you just talked about, right? Where you don't have to worry about those underlying subsystems, right? Like you don't have to have staff that are sitting around your data center swapping out drives or, making sure the power, the power converters or whatever are working, or the air conditioning is working, right? Like all that's handled by Google. And so you're not really responsible for that. And that I think is, a huge benefit that, if you start calculating and understanding the costs beyond just, what's your IT infrastructure spend, cloud becomes very profitable for most businesses. And I've seen studies where the companies that invest the most in cloud services generally have the highest productivity amongst their peers. So there's some research that shows that that's actually true.
Totally.
And the one other thing I just wanted to mention too, that somebody a long time ago kind of framed this out to me about the cloud, and you mentioned it, is, right, the cloud allows you to fail, right? And it makes failure an option, which I think is a weird way of thinking about it, but it's true, right? So, you can try out new things. If you want to try out AI or machine learning, you don't have to necessarily go and build a whole stack of specialized infrastructure to do that, right? It's available, and within your, you just start utilizing that service. And if it doesn't really work for you, or maybe you're not, getting what you need out of it, you can just turn it off and, try something new. And I think that's really a unique way of, and that I think is what is accelerating this pace of adoption, right, throughout all industries, not just technology industries.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I mean that, having the ability to, run experiments, and I actually like the phrase learn fast rather than fail fast. But it's a similar idea that you want to reduce friction in the process, right? You want to encourage more iteration per unit time, right? And the degree to which you can kind of offload the sort of infrastructure concerns makes that much more possible.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, and I think overall, though, I mean, the way that when I talk to customers, and when Cloudreach, when we talk to customers, we really try and open their mind and their eyes to, like, beyond just, how can I do exactly what I'm doing now, but do it in the cloud, right? How do I, and have them start to think more strategically and broader about, well, if we adopted this other cloud service, or we started to do data and analytics with the data that you already have, but maybe aren't utilizing, what else could we do? How else could you support your customers, or how else could you enter new markets and things like that? And then, then those become really exciting conversations, and technology becomes the enabler of those kind of conversations and those new business opportunities. Yeah,
completely agreed. The lift and shift is as a lot of, that's where a lot of people like to think about it, but and that's potentially a valuable thing to do as a sort of a stepping stone. But sort of the more interesting, in my experience, and the more the way to kind of get traction on starting into the cloud is to think about those new experiences, those new products, spinning up something innovative that you couldn't possibly do, or would be extremely difficult to do otherwise.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think, I think this is why, Cloudreach chose this as its purpose statement, right? Because the promise of the cloud, like, there is so much to do, there is so much opportunity that it can enable, and so we're really excited about having and helping customers achieve that promise. In the next conversation, we're going to talk about how do we do that, right? How do we actually help customers get from where they are to where they start to actually see the benefits of this, what the promise of the cloud is, and how do they achieve that? And so, but first, we're going to go back to Jerome. He's going to help us walk through another tasting of a rosé, I think. So we'll try that out, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about cloud, and kind of the other side of this is how to achieve some of these benefits that we've just talked about.
Yeah, and your descriptions there were right on as far as our winery and our growth, the rapid evolution that we had to go through using cloud services is basically what it's our whole current business model. And it really is, like, the people who didn't use those kind of technologies correctly and didn't roll with the punches and throw out a bunch of stuff and adapt are the ones that fell by the wayside. So yeah, very on point. This wine tasting is brought to you by Cloud Technologies.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, every business is being disrupted by cloud. And I think it's the people who adopt that and are bold in their adoption of it really are the ones who are going to be the successful businesses moving forward into the next decade.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, on your L2 Urban Flora Rosé, the next wine, that's going to be the very light colored wine that you have there. And I'm going to start by jumping back to the last conversation we were having about the skin contact on that first wine. So normally the way it's done is white wines are done with white grapes without skins, and typical red wine is a red grape with skins. So our first wine, as you saw, was a little bit of a hybrid, white grape with skins. A rosé, that's not actually a wine varietal. It's not a type of grape. This one in particular is done with mission grapes, but it's actually a red grape done without the skins. And it makes it more light and crisp and refreshing than you would get from the same grape done with the skins. So what you're drinking here is very much an easy drinking summer wine. Because of that lack of skins, it works really well in a lot of scenarios in which you might normally drink a white wine. You want it chilled, you want it on a hot day, you want it, seaside or by the park or gardening. Maybe that's just me, but anyway, I do enjoy it while gardening. Also, going back to the last conversation about appealing to other audiences than your traditional wine market, this one, because of some of those kind of tart, almost sour, really crisp notes that come through because of the lack of skins, this one is often compared to like a sour beer, which I think works well not only in the flavor profile, but with the pairings with it. You would want to pair it with a lot of things that are either really rich or maybe spicy or salty that kind of contrast off of those flavors, as well as it'll go well with things that have those same nice summer fruit notes. So things like your berry jam or the spicy pistachios, other things that have those type of notes will work really well with this rosé because it'll bring out the flavors of the sourness and then just kind of like evoke that summer outdoor type of feel with the wine. So hopefully you guys are enjoying that one. If you have a little of that left, you're welcome to save it or finish it, your call. And then we're going to jump into our next wine, the L3 Manifesto Barbera. So you'll notice that's a pretty big change from the rosé as you pour that into the glass. As far as like the depth of color, the amount of legs it has, which is how well it clings to the side of the glass, and how just deep and rich the flavors are. These grapes are not that dissimilar in flavor. The main difference is skins versus not. This Barbera is a red grape done with the skins. So you get the full body, the full jamminess, rather than that light, crisp summeriness that you get from the rosé. So it's the difference between watermelon, strawberry, cranberry, hibiscus notes and your fig, plum, blackberry, jammy notes. So the rosé is done with a mission grape. The Barbera, well, it's done with a Barbera grape, obviously. Neither of those are typical grapes used in commercial winemaking. They are both very standardly grown grapes, and they're often made into wine and drink, but not as much bottled and sold. So you won't see them on a lot of store shelves. You won't see them out in the market much. But the mission grapes, which are called that because they were brought to California from the missionaries, and the Barbera grapes, which are, they come from Spain and France mostly. they're both kind of grapes of the people. They're grown by a lot of the people who make the wines that do end up on the shelves, and that's what they drink when they end up going home. So us including those varietals is kind of a nod to our history in not a typical wine audience. They're just, they're grapes that everyday people would grow and enjoy. The Barbera, jumping back onto that one, because of its deep, like smooth, jammy, rich notes, not a lot of tannins, not a lot of spice or herbaceousness, will go well with things that have those same type of notes as well. So that can be things that have like your dark, like berry jams or figs or cherries, but it could also go with creamy, smooth items like cheeses or the cashew nuts, because it has those same type of qualities itself. While it doesn't have like your traditional, it doesn't have flavors of cashew, that creaminess that kind of goes with the cashew nuts will play along with the creaminess of the Barbera, because it doesn't have that acidity and spice or peppery notes. And similarly, while this isn't obviously something we could ship along with these, they go real well with a lot of Italian foods, anything with a red sauce or creamy cheeses, or spaghetti and meatballs or risotto, things that have that same type of characteristic, or even dessert type items like blackberry pie or cherry cobbler, or like dark chocolate works really well with this. And oh yeah, I should have mentioned that you will also have some dark chocolate rich, like fudgy type items in your kit, and those would be good pairings with this, along with, to be honest, any red. But it works really well with this because of those lack of like peripheral spices. Just goes real well, chocolate with the red wine. So on that note, I'm going to pass it back to you guys for our next slide.
There we go. Thanks, Jerome. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's really interesting to know, how I never realized that rosé was kind of red wine without the skin, which kind of gives it that more of a fruity flavor and sweet flavor, which definitely has. And I also like drinking wine when I garden too, so you're not alone there. So really, anytime. So back to our cloud conversation, and I think where we left off, Jeff and I, really talking about how do you achieve that promise, right? So delivering the promise of the cloud is our mission statement, right? And so how do we achieve that? So exactly, how do we go about that? Because it's really not an easy thing to try and accomplish, right? And so, Cloudreach, spends a lot of time advising customers on how to think a little bit differently when it comes to cloud services. It is not your typical IT service. And so, one way in which we engage with customers is the first things we ask them is not about like, okay, what's your data center look like, or what's your what's your stack of IT incorporate. What we really want to know is like, what are your goals and objectives of your business? Like, are you looking to get into new markets? Are you looking to engage with your customers in new ways? And those are the type of questions that we like to then build a technology and a cloud roadmap around, right? And so, your migration strategy or your cloud strategy really needs to adhere to your business strategy and not the other way around, right? You shouldn't be saying, well, this is how we're moving to the cloud, and so this is what we're going to be able to do when we get there, right? It should be, what do we want to do? And then let's build our cloud strategy around that. Otherwise, it's really just the tail wagging the dog. And so, that's how we try and build those plans for customers. And we try and understand, what are our customers really good at and where they may have deficiencies. in cloud and in understanding of cloud. And so, all that needs to come into the plan for their cloud transformation, right? And so it is, when you're taking on this kind of change within your business, it really can become something that transforms your business. And, but in order to do that, there really has to be an up and down alignment across the entire business, right? So this cannot be an IT-led initiative where just the IT team is focusing on this, introduction of cloud. It needs to be well understood and really driven from the board all the way down throughout the business so that they can really understand what the capabilities are and where the opportunities of utilizing cloud services throughout the entire business are. And, organizationally, Jeff mentioned this, cloud provides the ability to work differently, right? And to, try out these new organizational systems like Agile and DevOps, right? And so cloud is really built around the ability to provision infrastructure very quickly and be able to, work in a way so that teams can build in the operation of cloud and operation of their IT and their infrastructure within their development teams or within the business teams, so that they're able to utilize these services directly. And it's not siloed where you have, your development team writing the code that then gets thrown over the wall to the operations team, who then has to build an environment to make that work. Really the development team works hand in hand with that operations team to create these self-healing environments that are able to scale up and down automatically based on your utilization and on your need. And that organizational alignment is difficult to achieve if everybody is not really bought in on the cloud. And so, one of the things that we spend a lot of time with customers is trying to make sure that all the stakeholders, and even some that you may not expect, are brought to the table and are kind of bought in on this change. And in doing so, you are able to scale much faster. You're able to integrate these services much faster, and you achieve much better results. Once you have that ability to bring these development and operations teams together so that they're working hand in hand, you're really able to start to think about the things that you're delivering more as services than as solutions, right? And so, if you're able to bring infrastructure to your teams as a service, then that becomes something that they can then consume within their daily work, right? So your developers can, through code, access and provision infrastructure. Or maybe your marketing teams can access new databases of customer information through APIs or through analytics and data lake platforms that you can build in the cloud. And so if you start to think about these things more as services that you're enabling your stakeholders to consume, you start to really get an idea of how the cloud become much more powerful, much more effective in your business. And then how, really, how do you create, take all that and then begin to build out new business models and go after new opportunities in the market and do so very quickly. I think if you look over the last 2 years during the course of the pandemic, right, every business was affected by the pandemic, and just the very abrupt change that happened in the market very quickly. But if you look at the businesses that did really well, it was the ones who were bold and were able to move very quickly to change their business model or change their engagement model with their customers so that they were able to engage with them in online versus in person. And those are the businesses that did the most it did the most, did the best during the pandemic. And so, those are the things that I think about is, really starting to think about what your business objectives are, how you can align yourself organizationally, and then, what new opportunities do you want to go after? And then that's how you develop what your cloud plan and your cloud solution are. And so, when we do that, once we get that full sense of understanding with our customers, then it starts to become easy about how do we engage and start to adopt new services in the cloud. One of the questions, I'd actually wanted to ask Jeff about was, what are some of those new services that customers, should start to think about as they start aligning their business goals to their transformation goals? What are the, those unique newer services that are really starting to, customers are starting to adopt that can help drive change throughout their business?
Yeah, so happy to, touch on that. I'd also say that, +1 on the business stakeholder side, right? We were talking when we were prepping for this, and it's worth noting that prior to me coming to Google, I was actually a customer of Cloudreach in a previous role, and we were trying to, launch data science within a financial services environment, right? And so, think about layering on new practices, and I knew we needed to do it in the cloud to begin with. And so we brought in Cloudreach to help us really get that kind of executive alignment. You can imagine investment professionals being, fairly savvy when it comes to that sort of thing, right? And thinking about investing in new technology or in new operations. So, some of the kind of the newer services that people are starting to really pay attention to. I would say, maybe I'm a little bit biased because I spend time in the analytics and AI world, but, anything involving kind of getting better at understanding information and documents. So extracting information out of, unstructured documents, whether they're PDFs or reams of paper, like I said before. Anything involving bringing analytics together. So in the cloud, using data warehouses is really transformative, right? In the old days, you'd have to spin up and provision disk space, and it was really a hassle. Today, you can literally share petabyte scale data sets with colleagues and collaborators very trivially. And so, that changes everything. The last thing I'll tie back to is, you mentioned creating, services and not solutions. I'll connect that to the part that I was talking about a little bit at the beginning around site reliability engineering. There's actually a concept in SRE called SLO, which is the service level objective that you want to have for your service. And it's interesting because most people think, well, the service level has to be 100%, right? It has to work all the time. The actual truth to that is that no, if you over provision a service for more reliability than you need, you're actually hurting your innovation budget, right? If you can't afford to be down a little bit or to take some risks, then you're actually not progressing as fast as you want. So, in Google, virtually every service has one of these SLOs set, and if those aren't set early enough in the process, then the SRE team starts to kind of ask questions about that. So hope that that helps. I know we have some questions coming into the chat, but maybe we can get to them later.
I think we have one more wine tasting, then we'll start to answer all those questions. I think these it's really interesting. I know Netflix had that same SLO process, right? And it was really innovation over everything else, right? Like, how can we innovate?
Right.
And so if you had to wait 6 months to push an update to a customer, so that you didn't have any downtime, right? That was 6 months of time that customer was not getting the advantage of that feature. And so, the way in which Netflix did it, I'm sure Google does too, is they think like, what's more important? Is it the, 10 minutes of downtime versus the, 6 months of the ability to use that feature? And they really began to think about in new ways. And I think it's, it's interesting that, it does become like, how fast can we innovate? And cloud enables you to innovate so very fast. It becomes, something that your organization then, can really kind of keep up with the customer demand, because customer demands are moving so quickly as well.
Right.
And it may seem like this is, just such a kind of a big and difficult problem to solve, or maybe something, hard to really quantify. But really at Cloudreach, if you go to the next slide, we've developed a process that we work with customers to actually achieve this in, in really a realistic time frame, and being able to do it with a realistic amount of work. And really it follows this process, right? Like it's how do we understand what your strategy is as a business? How do we take that infrastructure and build around that strategy to enable that strategy to happen? And then looking at your application, once you have the infrastructure foundation in place, how do we take your applications and change them or convert them to more cloud native examples, so that then they become, those services like we talked about that, you can build off of and improve on, right? And so you don't have these monolithic application stacks, but really these microservices that can be utilized throughout many different applications and build new things, almost like Lego blocks throughout your organization. And then, really the last piece of this to bring in is that data and analytics. And so, these data is really, how businesses understand what change needs to happen. And there's so much data floating around in businesses, but not being utilized. And so the idea here is really, how can we collect that data that we need to really have a better insight into what we're doing as a business, how we're supporting our customers, and really what the market as a whole is doing. So how do we kind of consolidate all that in a way that we can actually utilize it and use it to our advantage? And going through this process with customers, and taking them through these workshops that we do at each phase of this really allows us to really get all this down and develop a real transformation plan that's holistic in nature and is actionable for those businesses. And so, yeah, I do think we have a couple more questions, but I want to get to this last wine tasting. So what we'll do is we'll go back to Jerome. He'll take us through that the last wine tasting that we have, and then we'll answer whatever questions that we have, and whether it be about wine or gardening or cloud. So Jerome?
Yeah, for what it's worth, I have no idea what businesses should plan for in the future, but if I had a magic wand, I'd have a full head of hair again, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I don't think cloud has a service for that yet, so Google's working on it though, I'm sure.
So onto our next wine. Your next wine is the L7 Delirium Cabernet Sauvignon. So this is a similarly dark wine as the Barbera, but with a very different flavor profile. And it actually kind of goes back to that concept of skin contact versus not. And like really drives home the point of how the skin usage and other parts of the winemaking process drive the wine, in addition to just the type of grape used. So the Cabernet Sauvignon grape is the smallest, like most raisined of all the grape types. And that's what gives it that most intense, spicy, earthy type of note. Kind of very opposite of the Barbera, which is very jammy and fruit forward. In addition to just letting that come forward, we also aged this, what's called partially whole cluster, which exactly like what it sounds, we literally throw some of the grapes in there while they're still grapes, while they're still on these stems, and let them ferment that way. And what that does is pass along some of that earthy, herbaceous note. Almost like the difference between a tomato still on the vine with the leaves attached versus a tomato that's not. And you really smell and taste that greenery. You get a lot of that with this cab. Because of that, this then is often like the favorite of a lot of traditional red wine drinkers, and oftentimes people who enjoy whiskey or bourbon or other drinks along those lines. And similarly, because of that earthy, herbaceous note, it goes well with, a lot of meats. I believe you have venison jerky and mushroom jerky, and both of those will go along really well with this. Also, anything that has that type of spicy, earthy note to it, like onions or olives or garlic. So the olives that you have in your kit will go along really well with this. And similarly, your salted chocolates and things along those lines will go real well with this as well, because of that playing off of the earthy, spicy notes with the wine. So hopefully you found some good pairings on this one and get to enjoy some of the differences in flavor from the Barbera. And I'll give you guys a moment now to switch over from that, either kill it or move to the next bottle. And we're going to be going into our L8 Wanderlust Red Blend. This one is just done in a typical red style, red with the skins on it. What is different about this one compared to the previous wines is that it is a blend, 50% Cab, 25% Barbera, and 25% Zin. And that is, it's something that's often looked down upon in wine circles. And that's part of why we highlight it, actually, because there's I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there's a little bit of like fanciness in wine that they, look down on people who don't know their wines, or, don't swirl their glass with their pinky out and whatnot. But your best wines are actually your blends, not your single varietals. Yeah, if you really know you like Cab's probably best for you. If you really like, Barbera or Zin or whatever, that's going to be exactly right for you. But making a blend, in this one, Cab, Zin, and Barbera, some of the most popular, versatile reds out there, will help you make your most smooth, balanced wine. It's got some of the qualities of those different grapes, but you can manage the some of the valleys that go along with those peaks. It's not as jammy and fruit forward as the Barbera, but it still has some of that jammy, like dark fruitiness. And similarly, it's not as herbaceous and forest earthbeddy as the Cab, but it still does have some of those qualities. So this helps in a lot of ways. One is it means that you can normally get a more economical wine than you would if you're choosing a single varietal. Two, it's really balanced flavor. So if you're like, you don't know what somebody enjoys, you don't know what you like exactly yet, or you're bringing it for a group and there's multiple people at the table, this is your most likely to fit everybody's palate. It also makes it the best for food pairing because it has all these different qualities. It can go with a lot of different things. So part of why we put this at the end is because it's a dark, rich wine and has the, a very high alcohol content. So you don't want to drink that early. But also because it's a great, I want to say, cleanup wine. Just about anything that's paired with your previous wines will go well with this. It'll go with the chocolates. It'll go with the meats. It'll go with the jams. It will go with the chocolate. The nuts, just about everything in there. Your olives will go well with this. We often describe it as being the wine that you could just pick randomly and is likely going to pair with whatever you're already planning on having for dinner that night. So it's become our biggest seller by quite a big margin because of those. Low price, balanced, very good pairing wine, and extremely high alcohol content. So that's a good combination as far as sales go, and it's become our flagship wine because of that. So at this point, you all had a chance to try the different wines, and hopefully whether you're a white wine, red wine, cider, beer, whiskey drinker, you've still found something that meets your tastes. So we're going to throw up a little poll here so that we can get some feedback and see what you guys enjoyed. And also, if you have any questions for the wine or about the wine for myself, you can ask those as well while we're answering questions about cloud services. And I'll jump into those questions here or comments to Neil. Yeah, not a lot of people know that about the stems and skins being thrown in because it's not commonly done. And it's similar to us having skin contact on the Chardonnay blend and etc. And partially why we built this lineup is because that storyline helps people, whether they're connoisseurs or new to wine, understand it. It makes it accessible and gives you some logic behind it. So I'm glad that was interesting for you. As for the sulfites, those are a preservative. They will affect your taste as well in a negative way, and that's balance. So as the name implies, sulfite will add a little sulfury note to it. So you get a little bit of funk, some acidity, not necessarily pleasant tastes, but it'll make your wine last a lot longer. We do ours kind of small batch, quick turn, and we enjoy the trade-off of good natural flavor versus extended shelf life. But that's the purpose of sulfites and why we don't add any. Canadian markets, we do not have any, although we are working on being able to export to both Canada and Mexico. And we did just open our tasting room and are about to open a second, much larger one right in the heart of historic downtown Sac. So if you guys come, mention that you had a tasting and you'll get a discount and some VIP treatment.
Excellent. I had a quick question, Jerome. Where does the artwork come from that's on the labels? They're all very beautiful.
Thanks. Similar to how you were saying, the Cloud, very sustainable, very like conscious. We not only donate back like $1 for every bottle to Sac Tree Foundation, SPCA, other things along those lines, but we also work with local artists and craftsmen quite often. And that's an artist named Micah Crandallbear, he was a school friend of ours growing up in Sac, and we arranged to use his art on our labels when we were a two-man operation, and he was an unknown artist in a little suite somewhere. He's now world famous, and last I heard he was touring Europe, but he was just an old school friend that we used his art before either of us made it big. And we both claimed that we each helped the other do that, but probably just all coincidence.
That's really a nice story. That's kind of a cool connection between, people, following their passion and then helping each other do it. And it sounds like your business, not only, allows you to follow your passion, right, but also allows, has helped others along the way with the charities that you help and, the other artists from your area. So that's really neat. And congratulations to you and your brother for starting this business.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thanks to you guys for having us on here. It's the reason why we're not just two guys riding around bikes delivering it locally.
Well, yeah, no, and we'll thanks to the Cloud as well, right? Is kind of making this all happen, right? Connecting us all. Yeah. So yeah, but really do appreciate the insight and the expertise that you've been able to offer us today. And so, if there were no other wine related questions, Jeff and I are around to answer any Cloud questions that people may have. One of the questions that came in earlier was, I think a really interesting one is how do what are the different financial metrics, right, that you should look at when you're thinking about the cloud versus an on-prem, right? And so maybe, Jeff, do you want to take a shot at that first, or would you like me to kind of start in and think about how I think about how businesses should really try and calculate the cost and the
Yeah,
return on
you're
investment?
probably more of a cost expert than I am, but I will say that, some of the metrics that I like to look at are around the velocity. So, how quickly are you shipping features? How many deploys to production can you do? All of the kind of velocity metrics that you might see in an engineering world. I think there's also complexity. You mentioned before, like shifting how you do your financial planning. Often that's like an annual budget type of process. I've been through that as a practitioner, sort of teaching my financial, business partners, like, hey, there is some amount of flexibility here, and that's actually a good thing. There's some amount of variability in how much we're going to spend, and so trying to get at a more iterative process around planning financial metrics. But I don't know, do you have more to it than that you might want to point out?
Yeah, no, I think those are exactly the way I think of it. Is you got to think beyond just like how much does it cost, or how much does my IT cost, and then your amortization tables that you may apply to them, right? Because the way that I look at it, when you think about hardware now can last 7 years and still be viable, right? And so there's a lifetime value and obsolescence of that hardware. But just because the hardware is still viable and still runs, it doesn't mean that it is providing your business with all the opportunities that it should, right? And so really, I think people need to rethink how they determine what is obsolete, and not necessarily whether can you still get updates for it, or can you get support for it, but really about, is it allowing you to respond to the needs of the market at the speed in which the market is requiring you to. And so if you think of it that way, if you're waiting around for your hardware to become obsolete to make a move to the cloud, or to make a change within your environment, there's a lot of market change going on that you're missing out on, because theoretically your hardware still has some life left in it. And so we really try and think about customers and think beyond, like, not only what is the cost of your hardware and how much value it has left, but really is what are you missing out on, right? And what's the opportunity cost, and the opportunity benefits the cloud can generate for your business. And so that's, I think, a different way of looking at it than necessarily trying to amortize a piece of hardware on your P&L statement.
Yeah. Do we have time for the magic wand question? Because I'm all about that.
Why don't we do that? I know we're over, and so I appreciate everyone kind of hanging on, but that would be a good, I think, closer. So maybe you could go first, and if you did have a magic wand to think about, how businesses can adopt cloud, really, what would that be, and how would you?
Yeah. So setting aside, alcohol and wineries and things like that, I think my first wish would be, next time let's do a bourbon tasting. So I don't know, Jerome, if you're getting into spirits, like that would be that'd be awesome.
We are actually just releasing not bourbon, but a line of wine technology and grape-based, but not wines. So we've released our vermouth and a port and some piquettes, which are a lighter, bubbly version, a couple of sparkling wines, and we're going to also do some meads and whatnot.
Amazing.
Mead is tasty too. I just had a tasting of that in my neighborhood. I live in Brooklyn, so all the hipster stuff is around. But so, magic wand for the cloud, I think I would say it quite simply as, making it easier to adopt, right? So, like we talk a lot about what are the, the great services and great products that you can build on top of, but there is complexity, right? There's no doubt about it. There's, there is a learning curve, and I really like the idea of making it as simple as possible to get started in the cloud, to try a workload, to do more demo, to demonstrate some, example and use your own, kind of business use case, right? So I want to build a website, or I want to analyze this data, or, I want to extract information from these documents, or things like that. And I think we actually, as an industry, still have quite a ways to go to make it as easy to use cloud, as it could be. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great one. And that's one that we kind of not necessarily the fear of the unknown, but like, how do you get started and really try out some of these things? One of the things that we do with customers is we really work on how do you get value very quickly, right? And so we talked a lot about like, how do you do strategy and things like that and developing it. But really what we want to do is get to that strategy piece out of the way so that we can actually get the value, generate some value very quickly. And so what we look for as part of those strategy sessions is like, where are the quick wins? Where can we, focus a little bit of effort and some time with our customers and develop quick wins so that the business as a whole can see, wow, this is really interesting. We did this quickly, it, solved a problem, and now we're able to, start to think about things more broadly. And so, we have things that, like we have we call it the Cloud Mayflower, right? So it's a way to kind of get to that new world very quickly. And so, it allows us to set up a cloud landing zone for a customer in GCP very quickly in a standardized way that's secure and safe, and then launch a new application into that landing zone. And we can do that within a couple of weeks and at very low cost. So there's not a lot of risk there for those organizations, but you get the benefit and you start to see like, hey, here's some value here, and let's see how we can build on that.
That's great.
For my answer around the magic wand, and I think more wine is always part of this, but one of the things I like, I think there's a lot of trepidation, right, when people think about the cloud, and they think, my job is going to change, my role is going to be, eliminated, or I'm going to, I'm the one who's managing these infrastructures now, like, where am I going to go? But really what cloud enables you to do is really focus on the more strategic aspects, the things you really want to focus on, and less of the monotonous work that, that reactive work that kind of takes up a lot of our time. I heard a study somewhere like 70% of the IT budget and resources goes to just keeping the lights on, right? So just making sure that the servers are patched and that they have the right, software installed and the hardware is, up and running. 70% of the time is kind of wasted doing that. That doesn't necessarily add value to your customers, right? That other 30% of the time, that's where you're really developing new services and doing more strategic things. And so, with the cloud, you can start to flip that around. And then, what could you do with, 30, 40, 50% more time on more strategic elements? And so, for me, it would be for people to stop like thinking about the cloud as some challenge to the status quo, but really something that can, liberate your organization and liberate, people in their careers to do new and great things.
100% agreed. It's been transformative in my career, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I realize we're kind of way over time, so I do appreciate the people who've hung around, and I think it's this has been really a great event. So, Jeff, thank you very much for your expertise and your thoughts on all this, and Jerome, I appreciate you talking us through some of these wines and helping us get a better understanding there. And hopefully we can do more of these in the future of between Cloudreach and Google, and looking forward to that. If you do want to reach out to us, here's some information about how to get a hold of us. We'd be happy to talk to you in more depth about the things that we discussed here today. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Hey, and before we all leave, we would love to take a photo of the group. So if everyone can go off camera, on camera, sorry.
On camera, there you go. Yeah.
There we go, that's the one. And Brandon, if you can take away the spotlights, and so we can gallery view. right, stand by just for a second, guys. Thank you all. I'm seeing those nice cameras come off. All right, I'll give you guys another second to come off camera, on camera.
Oh, there's a gallery, dude.
There we go. All right, great. One more second. I just got to get my camera up to get a screenshot. Beautiful.
Well,
Oh.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Okay.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks, everybody.